The Dallas Mavericks really just fell off the rails here, uh, heading into the playoffs, trying to get into the play-in, deciding not to go for a play-in spot, given their circumstances of not really being in the contender or even having a chance to get to the Western Conference Finals like they did last year. Um, really just deciding to basically punt the last game against Chicago there, as we saw. Luka came out for a couple minutes and played the first quarter, played roughly 13 minutes, I believe, in that game. And they really just punted that game, really just gave it away. Uh, Looking into what their options were, really just trying to play in the play-in, really have an uphill battle there, turn around or save your 2023 lottery pick potentially here that's coming up. And they had a better chance of doing that and not sending it to New York, I believe, if they basically missed the play-in. And now you're looking at this team that had Western Conference Finals stamped on them last year, coming into this year, really not hitting the right stride that they were supposed to be hitting as last year, having some departures there with Jalen Brunson. Of course, I'll get into that as well. But just looking at this Mavericks team, it looked like they just had a different gear there that they couldn't reach, right? Like they started off, really good, was in a really high seed there, 4th seed in the Western Conference. And then they felt like they always needed something else, right? They had that little tinkering with Christian Wood that really just didn't fit the team real well with Jason Kidd really hesitant to give him minutes, especially on the defensive end. He's just not a defensive player. Looking at that roster, they needed an offensive boost. Christian Wood could provide that. Didn't really pan out because of the defensive aspect of it. And despite all that, they were led by Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, but especially Luka Doncic. And those guys were able to play well and have at least a record above 500 in the Western Conference. And when you look at the Western Conference, where not too many teams have above 500 records, it's very close. The Mavericks were one of those teams. Obviously, they needed something, and people started rumbling, hey, Luka's getting disgruntled. They need to make a move here and there. And they did make a move. They ended up trading for Kyrie Irving, who has been polarizing himself, especially this year. The Nets were playing well, and then Kevin Durant went down. Everything started falling down a little bit around him, and he requested a trade. Then Kevin Durant requested a trade. Everything blows up in Brooklyn, as we saw. He gets traded to Dallas for Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith in the first-round pick. And he heads to Dallas with all the expectations in the world that this is going to at least help them get into playoff mode, push their playoff chances, help them in that direction, right? Like, I get it from that standpoint. You get a talented player like Kyrie Irving into your roster, you expect him to 25 points, the 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and somebody that you can play next to Luka. They score the ball, everything's fine. But they didn't really look at the dynamics of these two right there. And I think that was the misstep of the Mavericks. Understanding that you're bringing Kyrie Irving in, you're losing some type of foundation with your defense when you give up Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, who can help a little bit there. But Dorian Finney-Smith was really the guy that was switching, guarding the other team's best player, able to switch, able to provide help, and being that guy to help off of Luka and being able to basically shield these guys a little bit from getting attacked. And especially a team without any rim protection. Now you don't have any perimeter defense. Teams are constantly attacking them. We saw that over the last stretch since the All-Star break. Teams were just attacking them. Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, who was ever out there in the backcourt, they were going to get attacked, especially with the weak defense that they had. And that's something that we all knew going in, right? Like, we knew that pairing wasn't going to work in terms on the defensive end. And especially now that you add health, Luka missed some games, Kyrie missed some games. They were really never together to build a rhythm there and go forward and see what this team really could be. They were under 500. That's not something that they traded for Kyrie Irving. That was not the expectations that they desperately had. But when you look at the outlook of it, they couldn't defend. They couldn't get stops, especially close in games. We saw it against Atlanta when it was close in the game, and Kyrie Irving fouled Trae Young at the end of the game. Like, we've seen that a little bit there regarding these players, right? Like, defense wasn't their calling card, and especially with no rim protection in this league, you're going to lose. You have to have some type of rim protection, some type of perimeter defender that can switch out and help those guys when they're getting attacked. when you got one guy like that, you can kind of shield it a little bit with your defense with switching and helping and shadowing and kind of just zoning up a little bit on their side of the ball. When you got two guys that can guard, it's going to be pretty bad. Like, that's not going to help. They're going to look bad. And that's what Dallas was. They were bad down the last stretch of the regular season. Like, there was no question about that. And, of course, when you look at the Dallas Mavericks, who have been, as I talked about in my last video, have been free agent turmoil, building star power turmoil. They got lucky with Luka Doncic and drafting him, right? That was the one thing that they did. They definitely got Luka Doncic. Everything was going to look right from that standpoint. But overall, when you make a trade like that, you're wondering now what happens with Kyrie Irving. They don't have him extended. They don't have him on a contract right now. He's a free agent in the offseason. And you just gave up your picks. You gave up some stability. You gave up two players, valuable players now, to your team. Where does that lead you? Where does that leave you right now? And Mark Cuban hasn't been as committed to Kyrie Irving in his last comments there. It seems like they're heading in a direction where it's like, hey, maybe we can get some cap space there, whatever the case may be. I'm thinking more logically a sign and trade. Maybe something can happen there with Kyrie Irving. In my head, I'm just thinking of a couple teams that can probably take a chance. Miami, Kyle Lowry, probably Tyler Hero, throw some guys in there, whatever the case may be. Maybe you try to get Bam Adebayo. That's maybe just something I'm just thinking off the top of my head of something that can actually help them give Dallas a different dynamic. You actually add a defender with Bam Adebayo, somebody that can play pick and roll and actually defend on that end of the floor, especially as a big man in the Western Conference like that. He can do that. A different dynamic than Christian Wood. I'm just thinking that right there, that's one team there. Of course, Kyrie has been tied to LA. You think about Luka Doncic, where could he go? New York Knicks are an option, I'm thinking. Miami's, of course, an option. LA, one of the LA teams. Maybe that Kawhi, Paul George experiment isn't working as much. Sign and trade there. Something can happen there. You know, I don't think Luka's going to be that person that asks for a trade. And I know a lot of people are saying that he's disgruntled and things aren't going well. They pay Luka Doncic a lot of money. They are invested behind Luka Doncic. They have just not been able to put anything together substantially behind him. And I think that's been the biggest issue. They haven't been able to build any foundation of building blocks in regard to that. And you thought they had a couple players there that would have helped out, especially somebody that they could have just kept, which I'll get into in a moment. But Kyrie Irving's probably going to walk this offseason. Where does that leave the Mavericks? Leaves them without picks. New York has their picks. Brooklyn has their picks. Where does that leave them going forward? Now, do you think the logical thing would be to sign Kyrie Irving? If you do a sign and trade, at least you'll be able to get some assets or some players back in a trade. That would help you. I don't know if that's going to sit well with Luka. Maybe you can get something that's a little bit more foundational, a little bit more 3-and-D guys around him with a Kyrie Irving trade, right? Like maybe you can do something there that would help bolster the roster around him, at least a little bit more depth-wise, right? Now, looking at Luka, he's recently just signed a max extension. He's early into that. Now, we've seen guys really ask for a trade or get traded. Donovan Mitchell, that just happened with Donovan Mitchell. We can see guys get traded. It's not out of the realm. It doesn't matter the salary cap number. We've seen Russell Westbrook, John Wall. We've seen other guys get traded. Will Luka be that guy to axe out? I don't think so. I think they're going to try to build around him and salvage this. I think Dallas is too big of a market. They invested too much in Luka Doncic just to walk away and then make a lackluster trade or get 3 cents on the 3 quarters on the dollar, whatever the case may be. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. But looking at Luka Doncic, it's like, who can play next to him? Catch and shoot guys, defenders like that, like athletes. You need to do something where you can get Luka in a better situation where he's not so isocentric, everything's so reliant on him. Or if it is relying on him, at least make it a little bit more structurally sound around him. And when you bring guys like Kyrie Irving in there, you bring other guys out there that really just aren't really working, not even from a team dynamics on the floor, it's going to be difficult to win. You're going to be in the same situation, and the Western Conference teams are going to be building. The Kings are building. Memphis is building. OKC is building. And you're not really better than those teams. I wouldn't even say that they're better than the Utah Jazz, even though they have a better record because of Luka. But in terms of going forward, in terms of building blocks, in terms of assets that you can look forward to or trade or whatever the case may be, other teams have more options, a lot more options than Dallas right now. And they could have imagined that they could have just kept Jalen Brunson in that. They could have just signed Jalen Brunson. Reportedly, Mark Cuban came out and said, hey, his parents got in the way and that stopped the signing and that stopped us from getting it to him and all this other stuff. And Tim McMahon, reporter for ESPN and the Dallas Mavericks, I believe he covers the Mavericks and Grizzlies or other teams around the league and stuff like that. But he said that they said to him, Jalen Brunson and his father said to him, they went to the office in January last year and said, hey, if you put the offer on the table right now, we will sign it. And that offer was 4 years, roughly $54 million. And they didn't offer him the contract. 4 years, $54 million. You're not killing your cap space with that type of move. You get a guy that's at least able to score, at least be able to play defense, and they didn't offer it to him. And when they didn't offer it to him, he outplayed his contract. We saw what he signed for the offseason, 4 years, $106 million to the New York Knicks. Everyone thought he got overpaid. Whatever the case may be, the Knicks are in 5th place in the Eastern Conference, firmly in the playoffs. Contrast to Dallas, 11th place in the Western Conference. Looks like you should have paid him that $54 million. Looking at it, in the grand scheme of things, you wouldn't have to deal with the uncertainty of Kyrie Irving. You would have had Jalen Brunson on 4-year contract. You can have moved other pieces around them because Jalen Brunson actually got his shots off next to Luka. Actually defended next to Luka. And was able to play well. Able to step up in certain situations. Was he going to be the final answer? But no, that's a good building piece next to Luka. At least you got the guy that can get his own shot, create, play some defense, and be tough next to Luka in that backcourt where it's a little more difficult to pick on him. You have Dorian Finney-Smith with that. That defense is a little bit better there on the perimeter-wise. And all you have to do is sign a guy for 4 years, $54 million, and you chose not to. Now you're putting in scramble mode. Now you got Tim Hardaway Jr., you got Maxi Kleber. What else do you have with this team right now? And with the potential of Kyrie Irving walking, what do you have right now if you're Dallas? What do you have? It's really tough to look at it right now, and it's just like a bunch of uncertainty for Dallas. And they're in a pickle right now. I don't think Luka Doncic is going to ask for a trade, but I do think that he's going to start putting pressure on the organization to be like, hey, we got to do something here. We got to get something. You guys got to start building this team right. And as a franchise player, yes. The Mavericks kind of owe it to Luka Doncic to start putting the pieces around him. And I said it before and I say it again. It kind of reminds me of LeBron in Cleveland in his first stint. You start looking around like the John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Like, yo, what's going on here? Like, I'm not getting the support. And people are saying that Luka's fat or whatever the case may be. People have been saying that, going at him and being like, he's not in physical shape all the time or whatever the case may be. He's too isocentric. We've seen teams win that way. And I'm not necessarily championships all the time. We've seen people, Magic Johnson had the ball in his hand a lot. Jason Kidd got to the finals a couple of times. James Harden has been able to win 50, 60 games a season. Luka Doncic is in that class in terms of pace, controlling the game, all that stuff. Able to pass, able to shoot. He's going to take a lot of shots. Whatever the case may be, whatever you want to say about him, those should lead to wins. And even though they're struggling this year, they should be better than what they are. You know what I mean? Like, no one ever looked at this roster and was like, I thought they should have been right around 500, a little bit above 500, depending on what happened. And they just weren't able to do that. So you start looking into the offseason, what's the best options for them? Are they going to go the free agent route? Hasn't always worked out for them. Should they do a sign and trade option with Kyrie Irving? I think that's probably the best option. Like, hey, Kyrie, we will pay you what another team agrees to pay you, whatever those numbers are, and just help us out by facilitating a sign and trade. That happens all the time in the NBA. It should happen here. I think that's the best option for the Mavericks. They keep their lottery pick, and maybe they use that in the trade. You know, they pair Kyrie Irving with the pick to get players that they want to need and other picks back, or whatever the case may be. But that pick that they tanked for was the only thing that they made sense in this whole season. Them losing against Chicago was the only thing that made sense this whole season going forward. Like, all right, let's at least retain our pick. Maybe we have a little bit more options. Maybe there's a player we like, whatever the case may be. That was probably the smartest move for them going forward. Rather than trying to win, be in the playoffs, have their pick go to the Knicks, they have another pick now that they can use in a trade and facilitate and do other things. But it's just uncertainty right now in Dallas. And as I know everybody's freaked out, and especially worried about Luka and what his state of mind is looking at this team. But I think they're okay with Luka. I think they just have to start putting pieces around him that actually benefit his play style, benefit the team, how his defense is. Like, you got to start building. You drafted this guy. You're paying max money. You have to start putting pieces around him to make it make sense. Otherwise, you're just wasting his time, really pissing him off, and he might ask for a trade. That's how I look at that one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like what you're seeing, of course.